Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome back to What the Deaf podcast. Oh, we are so excited to have the beautiful, amazing Elizabeth Blake Thomas with us. She is a director, a philanthropist. She is the owner of Mother and Daughter Entertainment. She has a podcast, Filmmaking Without Fear. She is just, the list goes on and on. And before I jump in with all of our curious questions, we would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience and how you got to hear What the Deaf.
I think you covered a lot of it by explaining what I did, but I will say there's one term that I use to describe me that you didn't use, which is a storyteller. I really enjoy that word. I like it in every single language, the word story. And I feel that there's opportunities for us to tell stories in every way that you described me: directing, podcasts, philanthropy, my book, anything I do is all through story. But you did an excellent job.
I saw one of your quotes in an article, and you mentioned about you're not just a storyteller. You're not just writing the story yourself, but you're also listening to other stories. And I think that is a very powerful thing as a deaf individual who always wants to share our stories about, the deaf community. And we need people to listen and understand our stories. And so that quote really spoke to my heart. And I know how you are aware with accessibility and everything within the entertainment industry. So I can't tell you how much we really appreciate you and love that quote about listening to other stories and people telling their stories.
But it was good, wasn't it? I mean, it really is truth. And I think that's the thing that we all get used to, is what do I want to tell? What do I need to tell? What's my message? And actually, by listening a lot more, we learn a lot more. And I know that one of these spiritual guides that I've spoken to in the past explained something very well. They said, if you went into a room filled with people, actually the quieter ones, the ones that don't speak, are the most successful, because they're the ones that are listening. And that really touched me. I thought, okay, I'm going to take that on board. I'm going to understand what that means. And there are times, obviously, when I go into spaces and people are intrigued by me, especially being in America. The first question I always get is about being British. Then people are intrigued about my boat. Then they're intrigued about my daughter. Then, and it's constant. And I actually have to really try hard to stop conversations and say, but tell me about you. I want to know about you. And so listening, sacred listening especially, which actually I spoke to somebody about the other day, where you really hear, you really take that time, is something that us as a society kind of wash over very quickly. So this is great that you're talking to me, but I love the fact that you also said, if I have questions, so I can hear you talk and understand what your perspectives are and listen to your stories, however they might be told.
And I think that's an amazing thing about you, and especially being a female director within this entertainment industry. And all three of us have worked together with you on an amazing feature film where Carly was the ASL consultant, I was acting in it. And your approach to just saying, what do you need from me? What do you need us to do in our production to make you guys thrive? And it's not often we hear that. So I'm wondering, with your project, how did you get that mindset to be like, what do you need? What got you to that point? Because many people say we don't have the budget for it. It's an automatic no. So what made your mindset be like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that and figure it out?
I think because I believe that I know nothing. And somebody might say, well, hold on, you're being derogatory about yourself. But I like saying that. I actually embrace now knowing nothing. So in the past, because I probably came from a place of fear, I've wanted to join in conversations, or I've wanted to give my opinion, my pen is worth, this is what I know, because I've wanted to feel like, well, I don't want people to think I'm stupid. Actually, now I say, no, listen, I know nothing. Please help me learn, because I don't want to make a mistake. And I think if you go in with a vulnerability of that, like I did with you, which is, guys, I'm probably going to say the wrong thing. I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to be doing here. You were very, very kind. I mean, there's no other word for it, kind, in helping me learn. And I'm still learning. And in fact, what you taught me has then had a ripple effect already with the people that I talk to. I'm able to even make it very clear. I don't say, I have 2 deaf actresses. I have 2 actresses who are deaf. The terminology, the way you say it. I hope I've got that right, by the way, because that's what I have been saying. But the terminology, the way it is hard in an indie film. There are budget constraints. It's COVID. There were other constraints with extra people on set. Timing wise, I was shooting within an 8-day period. All of these things. And I made a choice to say, no, I'm still going to do it. There's an easy choice, or there is a choice that is less easy. It doesn't mean that it's impossible or difficult. It just means you have to look at things in different ways.
It's all about perspective in life and how you want to look at it. You want to look at it on the positive side or the negative side, and transition how you approach the situation. I remember when I became your ASL consultant for this amazing film, and there was a situation that happened during COVID, where there's a limited amount of people that they could have on set. And so we tried to figure out how we could put myself on set. And I felt like I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to explain why it was important to have an ASL consultant. You handled that situation. And it showed me that no matter if it was a low budget film or high budget film, it didn't matter. There was still always a way to figure it out, instead of just saying, you know what, we'll eliminate the easy guy because, we could just bring in a makeup artist or costume director, because I wasn't important. So it made the deaf actor not important. And you made sure that that didn't happen. And the deaf actor on your set had such an amazing experience. And it was amazing. And more people need to have that perspective and understand how important it really is for those actors on set.
And it is hard, because I will tell you, of course, there are people there sitting behind the scenes with budgets, or people saying, but this is too difficult for us today, or you should just do this scene with 2 hearing actors. Of course, I mean, that's constant. And I kept saying no and no. And it's easier when it is my own production. It does allow me, I'm not talking to a studio, I'm not having to say that. But I will say, because I've done it in this situation now, if I was put in a situation with a studio, I have the knowledge now to say to them, no. I know this is possible. I know how to make it work. But I think it's good to give ourselves that experience. But, not just yourselves on my set. I had the lead, Danielle Perez, who was in a wheelchair. I made a huge boo-boo on a set before she arrived. I wasn't actually helped as much with the information, because unfortunately I had a conversation. I believed I'd put everything out there in place. I'd come up with a concept, an idea, and the actress had said, yes, that's fine. And then actually 2 weeks later, I got the manager saying, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, what? I thought we'd arranged it. I thought this was okay. So I think it does also fall on an actress, an actor, to speak up for what they want. But let me also say, I'm not meaning just because maybe there's a case of having a disability or less abled. Even with my daughter, who takes jobs, we make it very clear now what we need. So there's no miscommunication. So I mean that for anybody. And it's funny we're talking about this, because I'm really thinking at the moment in my life about learning about compromising and how much we compromise as human beings, whether that's, going out for supper somewhere that you don't really want to go, at the time you don't really want to go, all of the above. It doesn't have to be in a serious situation such as this film setting. We all compromise as humans. And so it's about understanding in life where we need to and where we shouldn't. And I think that's important.
How you explain that and how your mindset is so strong on that. Obviously, you had to learn, it doesn't come right away, right? So, how did you learn to get to that point?
Well, it's definitely a mindset of me as an individual, which you're right, you don't just get there. It's it's my birthday tomorrow and I'm 39 plus 2. But it's very much about that journey right from the beginning to now. And so when I've become so much more conscious of my choices and my actions, I have to say it can be exhausting because you can't just be selfish. You can't just do whatever you want and not care. And so you have to think about everything in detail. And that might even be, I'm watching this docuseries at the moment on Netflix, understanding where bottled water comes from. And I had no idea what went on behind the scenes. And then I've also been watching the ones about the cocoa beans making chocolate. Well, there's no way I can buy any other chocolate than this one brand that supports these farmers. So suddenly you get into a world of, I have to be responsible. I have to take responsibility for my part as a human being in this world, what affects everybody. And so there are still things that, I'm not happy with from a point of view of when I'm on set, the lack of recycling. We do our bit, but it's not as much as I'd like. The fact that we've had this, what I call the great pause with COVID, the fact that we've had to go to wearing masks and the waste of plastic now is not where I want to be in the world. But if at least I can try to bring my consciousness into everything I'm doing, that infiltrates and ripples through into what other people are affected by. So my daughter, as you all know, Isabella, is a mini me, but because she hears me, she sees me, those actions have an effect. And we just need to all start taking that responsibility. So this consciousness for me has developed over these years and is still growing. That's the other thing. We never reach that point. And that's where I think people's egos can come in. I know it all. I know what I'm doing. Actually, we can all learn and we can all improve every single day.
Very well said. I'm curious, what made you become a storyteller? How did you start with that career? And what made you find that mother-daughter entertainment industry and think of that industry that you own right now?
So the storytelling and then kind of ending up where I am, the storytelling aspect, I kind of need to go backwards and then really backwards. So the great pause happened. And in July, I took myself off for the first time on holiday on my own. Now, that's huge for a number of reasons. One is I never spend money on myself. I'm a mother. You spend it on your child. That's what you do. And I was in a situation where I needed to do something for me. And I'll never forget having to pay for this hotel. I was like, oh my God, this is a lot of money just for me. Is this going to be worth it? And I did, though. And I took myself away and I gave myself the time to breathe. In fact, I've just written a blog post on this about breathing and stopping, because we're all so quick to carry on with our lives. And I felt like I was pretty sorted. I'm a director. I do what I do. But on the way back from having spent 4 days in my own head, in my own time, I had written several concepts and I was driving and suddenly the word storyteller came to me. And I thought, that's it. That encompasses who I am and what I'm about. Because sometimes as a society, you can't be a director and a podcast host and a filmmaker and a mother. What are you? It's like when we choose a genre for a director, you can't have all genres, Okay, why not? Who says that? What was that rule that it got invented? So with this was the same. I want to have an umbrella term that can encompass everything. But if I look back to when I organically became that storyteller, it was from a very young age. I ran a theatre company. I loved teaching young kids. I had one session with these 4-year-olds, and I was telling them a story, and I realized that as I was telling them this story, they were just staring at me like this. And I realized that stories had such a power. And I made this story up as I was going. And this one story in particular, I would get to the end of a sentence and I'd say, and do you know what happened now? And the kids would go, yes, yes. And I was like, well, you don't, because I've never told you this story before, but I love the fact you're interacting. And again, the stories started to develop their own lives. And so not just from writing stories at a young age, but the theatre, then my own daughter, being in an industry that was constant stories, just kept me going. And it was only, as I said, half a year ago now, just a wee bit over, that I realized that the storyteller was a phrase that just encompassed who I am. And so the Mother-Daughter Entertainment is just the company, the name of the company that obviously me and my daughter work together, just seemed to, again, encompass a love, a generosity of spirit behind the title that encompassed everything that we did.
I'm curious, what do you think would be the first step for us as a deaf community to educate the entertainment industry on how best to work with the deaf community, or how to give them access without making them feel the burden of having to explain what their needs are?
So I feel like it's not just your community. There are so many communities that need to infiltrate the entertainment industry. You know, a year and a half ago, it was female directors. It's like now that's kind of irrelevant. You know, there are so many different areas because it's been run in one way for so long. But I don't want to blame the entertainment industry for that. I look back at the education system. You know, the education system in the UK especially has been like this since the Industrial Revolution. So for over 100 years, because that's the way we did things, 5-day working week from 9 till 4. This is the way in the classroom, sitting like this. That's the way it should be. Well, no, it's not. But it's not the fault of the system. It's the way that the people have come in because that is what they believe should happen. Look at this year. The fact that companies have said, hold on, you mean I don't need to put everybody that works for me in an office? They can work from home and I can trust them. We are literally revolutionizing the world at the moment. And I think it's not about just saying there are certain tipping point people, you know, maybe it's these main actresses at the moment that are from the deaf community that are doing well. Maybe they're the ones that are going to help us with the tipping point. It shouldn't just be that, but that's how we're starting. I think it's not about saying that things should take a long time either, because that's often the excuse. You know, I think we're cleaning up the seas in 2053 or something. It's like, okay, why can't we just do it now? Because there's bureaucracy, there's people to get through. But going back to the fact of the specific, your community, I think it's about saying that these entertainment industry leaders are overwhelmed. They are overwhelmed at the moment with what is the right thing to do. Because are they going to get into trouble? Do they know what they should be doing? Now, some people don't care and others do, and that crosses over. We've got the huge diversity issues coming into place. Again, are we worried as a community of all hearing, all seeing, all abilities saying the wrong thing? Yes. But then I know I've got my guy producers that are worried about saying something that might affect me as a woman. We're all walking on eggshells at the moment, which isn't a bad thing. But as long as if we crack those eggshells, we're not going to be chastised, we've got a way that we could be fixing this. The trouble is, we are in a world at the moment that we are chastising everybody. We've got cancel culture. We've got this. So people are scared. We're very scared. We're all coming from a place of fear. So I think helping educate what we're doing actually by having a project, a small project that we are taking into a studio, that we are educating them in a soft way, getting in first. My daughter's just picked up some amazing IP. And again, I look at that project and go, perfect opportunity to make some change. What are the projects I already have that can make the change? Not about going to them with I am going to make a project that's just for the deaf community or just for people in wheelchairs. Actually, let's normalize it all within a project that we already have. Let's just think about what could we do here? And bit by bit, we're going to help them. I mean, let me just tell you as well, just so you don't feel it's all about you guys, I got questioned whether I should direct this film. Okay? And I said, you know what? I'm open to whatever's best for the project, but of course, I would like to. But they are insecure about a female director that has only done indie projects. So I get questioned. We're all being questioned. How can we encourage people and give them the feeling that it'll be okay? And it's about showing, not just telling.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, season 1, and now going into season 2, is to start answering those questions that people are afraid to ask, starting the conversation, starting a positive dialogue with many people who have no idea or want to know but are too scared to ask the questions. We wanted to make this podcast a safe space for all, especially with season 2 now, with talking to so many diverse people within the entertainment industry. And again, there's no solution to answers here, but having a dialogue about this really opens people's eyes to being inspired or to learn more and to grow. Again, we just want this to be a safe space. And we started a production company, What the Deaf Production, to hopefully bring awareness to the entertainment industry to say, hey, we want to be the go-to resource for anything related with deaf people within the industry. So that was our goal, because we want to create a safe space for all too.
We don't start, then who will take this conversation? And I think it was really important what we just kind of touched on at the end, which is about listening to actually the people that don't know and are scared. They're almost the people that we need to infiltrate more than the ones that are power speakers and going out there. You know, I don't need to convince a vegetarian to become vegan. They're already on that route. But actually, I need to convince the meat eater. I need to get them to understand. And I think that's something that even speaking to you today has reminded me. I don't need to convince the people that support the female groups as directors. I need to find the people that don't. I need to teach them. I need to educate them. And I think that's just reminded me, actually.
Yeah. That's, again, why we're having these conversations with hearing people within the entertainment industry, because we need to speak to them. Oftentimes in the deaf community, we are really good at talking about what the problem is within our own community, but we haven't really had the opportunity to reach out to the hearing world and see how to fill in the gaps and how to communicate and just understand and get through to them in that way.
Exactly. There's no point me going and speaking at all female groups about being female directors. They already believe me. They already understand what that's about. I need to be speaking to the other people to convince them. And also remember, it's about acknowledging, as I said at the very beginning, that I know nothing, and that's okay. Show that vulnerability. I've watched this documentary series on Netflix, Rotten, and I am astounded at my stupidity. I am astounded at the lack of knowledge that I have from where my avocado comes from. And I love an avocado, but I'm going to a shop. Oh, I'm going to buy this one. No. You can't do that anymore. I need to not be purchasing them from this country. I need to be purchasing them from this country. In fact, Isabella was laughing at me because every time I've watched an episode, the next morning I've said, oh, Isabella, garlic. And she said, what now? What can't I do? And then I said, oh, Isabella, avocados. What? I said, no, I promise you there's a lot that we need to know. So these types of programs are fantastic for educating us. But we need to not be afraid that we don't know anything and to own up to that, own up to our lack of knowledge. That's important.
I agree. And I think I also grew a lot throughout this podcast by listening to her story as a deaf person, listening to Sarah's story. I'm also deaf, but my journey is completely different than Sarah's. So I can only imagine other people's stories. So by doing this, I think it's a good eye opener for me to realize, oh, okay, this is just my story and it's completely different than Sarah's. And so when we came up with her story and how we could accommodate that to still have it be her story, but represent the deaf community as a whole, And that has, there's always a lot of conflict within the deaf community because every individual is different with their journey. Some have hearing parents, some have deaf parents. And when they try to share their stories, it doesn't always apply to everybody. And they'll get defensive and say, hey, that's not relatable. That's not how the deaf community is supposed to be like. But it's like, hey, that's that individual story. And my story happens to be different too, but we can always share that. And so it's a real eye opener for me to say, okay, you know what? This is my story. This is Sarah's story, but we're still a part of the same community. And as a society, I think that's a beautiful thing.
And I think it's important that you guys really do remember all the time, because you know what you know, because you are those people in that situation day to day. You're experiencing things. There are people that are not going to have experienced what you've experienced ever. And you have to take yourself constantly back to that place and grounding yourself and never forgetting where you came from. And that, again, doesn't just apply to you. That applies to people in any industry, with any ability, whatever it is, because you kind of reach the top and you forget what it was like making the coffee. And therefore, clarification is also very important because, for example, on this project, Sarah, you especially, it's your story that we started with. So you're not only in it as a producer, you're in it as an actress, and you're in it as a co-story writer. Well, what you have to remember is with those different hats on, is that will affect you in different ways. So when we're making films, we have to understand and make sure we leave our egos at the door of what is going to be best for the story, what is going to be best for the film. When do I need to speak up to say, no, this isn't right for that. By the way, this is what you need. What's going to be right for the masses? Because it is about having clarity on each issue. Because if you're in a situation and you run a studio and you're being approached by these people, these strong women who've got this strong concept with these strong ideas, and they're thrown in at the deep end, it might be better that we step back, think about it, clarify it, understand our feelings before we go in there, understand where they're coming from. And that is important in life. It's about hearing people, as we said, really understanding why are they defensive, or what do they not understand? What am I taking for granted that I've known and they didn't know? And that could even be something as simple as the situation we're in at the moment, which is that script is sitting with a studio and we're waiting. I know we're waiting. Somebody else like yourself might be sitting there going, well, I haven't heard anything yet. And all it needs is for a text or a call from someone to say, hey, I just wanted to know, have you heard anything, or what's going on? As opposed to coming from a defensive place of I'm being shut out or what's going on. So as I said, that doesn't just apply to your community. It applies to all of us in life. If we're all open to speaking and having conversations and not coming from a place of worry, fear, ego, then we're all going to have a much nicer time with things. This is what life's about. And we all want to have a nice time, don't we? We're not here forever. Might as well enjoy it.
Again, I feel like I just need to not say anything, continue to let you talk, because everything you say is just so wide and so well said. And I hope people are just inspired by what you say. And I'm wondering, do you have any questions that you would like to know from us, or anything you want to ask us? Putting you on the spot here.
That's okay. You can. I like being put on the spot. Well, I think let me ask a question based on my experiences with you on set, because obviously if this is the entertainment industry, actually, well, let's do two things. Let's speak to you as the entertainment industry and that experience, and then let me talk to you as my friend, because I think both of those are slightly different. So let's start with the friendship, because that obviously then led to the entertainment industry. So when I first met your family, which is nearly 10 years ago now, which is lovely, it was interesting to meet you for the first time, because I had not been around anybody that was deaf. It just was not at my school. It wasn't in my hometown. It wasn't in my city. It just was not something that was part of my everyday life. And so meeting you and your family and seeing what went on was always very interesting to come to the house, because everything you guys did as normal was very different to the way that I have lived my life. So how was that, having people that don't know you come into your life? And, is it awkward if they ask you questions? How does it make you feel?
Really a good question. For me, I'm always an open book. I always enjoy when people do ask me questions, because if they don't, it always leads to assumptions. So I'd rather them ask. And over time, when people meet me, because I can speak, because I can hear, and because I can read lips, oftentimes many people forget that I am actually deaf. So that is kind of a double-edged sword for me, because yes, I could communicate with them and I'm able to put in the work to really understand people, but oftentimes they forget that I do not understand completely. And I don't say like, hi, my name is Sarah, I'm deaf. It's not the typical thing I do when I first meet people. So when they meet me, I'm like, one of our good friends said, deaf 101 for hearing people. I'm the easy deaf where they can just communicate, talk. I might have to ask for repetition, but I can pass by and get through the day with talking to them. So every interaction with people has typically been normal, and I'm able to just get by, but I do put in a lot of work because I talk and because I hear, and that's just the normal. But I've never had anyone ask me questions about like my crooked smile or like what happened to you. Those were never into play. My deafness comes first before my crooked smile, surprisingly. Yeah.
Mm. And obviously, when I first met Carly, I think that was at one of your events here, that your father's house. And I think that was, again, being open to a community that was like, oh, okay. So now Sarah has to communicate with both sets of the world. It's the hearing world and the non-hearing world. And watching that come into play. And obviously, it had a huge influence on my daughter, because, she's learned sign language and, would like to be even better than she is. But it's an important aspect to understand, because if we can infiltrate the younger people, I always think it's about the education, that becomes normal for them. You become the normal. It's not just I'm learning French and Spanish at school, I'm learning signing, French and Spanish. That's what becomes normality. And so then, getting to know you, getting to know your family and understanding how things work, obviously led to me then putting you in my film, because I knew you were an actress. I mean, you were a makeup artist in one of my first little shorts, and I wanted to involve you and get you part of that. But the both of you can answer this from a point of view of, I know you said you enjoyed it and it was great being on my set, but is there something that made you think from another filmmaker's perspective that could have been done better? Should I have known things before I came to you? Should I have done research? Because obviously, as a friend, I said to you, I know nothing, I need you to help me. But if you didn't know me and I was approaching you, how would I know these things? What could I do? How could I help myself?
That is a good question. I think you already did. You had a very good start by having a deaf person on the team, to where they could share their perspective, they could share their community, and pull in more deaf role models to be a part of that film. Because again, the deaf community is something that the deaf people are immersed in. And if we want to collaborate and work with the hearing community, you have to have us there present to be able to share and facilitate. And so I think you had already done that by having a deaf team. And when a situation came up and you weren't sure how to clarify it, you had a deaf person there to go ahead and ask, instead of putting the burden on the actor when their role is to specifically be the actor and play their character. Oftentimes in films, they always say, hey, they ask the deaf actor, what do you think I should do? So they put that extra work for them. They already have to memorize their script, plus they have to explain how they're supposed to find an interpreter, who's supposed to be the ASL coach, who this and this and this. That's a lot of work. So bringing in a deaf person to be responsible and focusing on all of those things, and then the actor who is deaf can focus on their role and provide and be able to be the best actor that they can be. They bring in makeup artists who is deaf, that's fine, but ask the deaf person who is responsible about bringing in the community and making sure that they're able to put on their role instead of playing multiple hats, being their role, plus looking for the interpreter, plus bringing in, deaf members from the community. That's a lot on them.
Well, and also I remember when, the script was first written, it wasn't the scene that I put you guys in wasn't written for actors who are deaf. It was written for hearing actors. And so I remember that situation when, excuse me, when you were talking to the writer and you were saying, well, actually what should have happened originally is that you would have had a writer from the deaf community helping you write the scene. So my writer learned as well. I mean, we did it a little bit, the wrong way round. But by doing that, I always think sometimes, doing it the wrong way allows you to learn, because I'd have never known what was right if I hadn't done it the wrong way. And also I liked the fact that the roles that I gave to you were not roles, you are going to play somebody who is deaf. No, you're playing a mum and a daughter. By the way, you just happen to be deaf. So I think that's an interesting concept too, because we're looking at the next film. Obviously, that's specifically written based on yourself. But this role was you're a mother and a daughter. I just chose to have two actors who are deaf. How does that work for you, having a film that's specifically based on your ability versus playing a character and you just happen to be deaf?
One of the things that I love that you said is that I just played a character who happened to be deaf. So I love that. Just focusing on the character and exploring the character themselves. I would love to have roles that are just like that, where the character itself is a character. It's a doctor. It's a lawyer. It's a mother. And I just bring my color of being deaf, just happens to be deaf. Like, it's not the main focus of the character. It's just what happens to be. That is beautiful. It's freeing as an actor, and I can just really explore the character. Now, when we go into a story about my personal life that is really a deaf-centered film, it's to show authentic representation and show what beauty the community is, the deaf community is, and shows the different layers of deaf. So that brings more of an education of showing a different side of someone's life as a deaf person. So there's two completely different stories. It's because your film that we're working on now is deaf-centered. It's more important to really authentically represent what my journey looks like, and that it's freeing in a different way, because I can truly show people in this world what my upbringing looked like. And it's not the same as everyone else, that every deaf person goes through their own journey, and that's okay. My story might be different than Carly's, and that's okay. Even though a deaf person might be watching this film and say, that's not me, but it's me, it's my story. It doesn't have to be the same. You should see, and I think the hardest part too is there's not enough deaf stories out there. So it's hard to try to tell my story that might be different, because there's not enough stories out there to show the variety of the beautiful culture of the deaf community.
And not only that, but there's not enough stories or characters who happen to be deaf. There's a lot of deaf people who are a part of TV shows, and they're recognized, and they recognize the sign language, but it's more of a trend where they're like, oh, wow, they're speaking in sign language. Oh, they're deaf. Wow. That's their number one priority as a character. So there's not enough films that have characters who they're just the character who happen to be deaf. So I think if we have more of that, we'll be able to appreciate the variety of different storytellers out there within our deaf community.
Yes, it's funny because I watched something the other day, a procedural, and there was a lead who was deaf in it. I don't know if it was just one episode or a couple of episodes, but I got really cross with the way they'd edited this, because I know that they chose to do it to allow the audience to watch the show at a normal space or time. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she signed, sometimes the camera could be on her and not. It wasn't fair to her with her ability. And I felt like it was trying to help us understand that there was this character who was deaf, but not really. And so I think, again, going back to how can we educate people, is understanding that if you do have a character who happens to be deaf, and again, as we said, not a character that we've chosen to play that role because she's playing a deaf character, but the character that's a mother or whatever that just happens to be deaf. As an audience, we need to sit there with what that's like. So do you remember the beginning of our documentary? We have the first, I think it's 3 or 4 minutes, where you're signing and not speaking. And I'll tell you something interesting. I've shown it to a couple of people. And again, this isn't saying anything bad about them, but they've gone, well, do you know what? We should probably cut that bit out and go straight into when she starts talking. And I've gone, really? Why is that? Well, because we're just having to sit there and read it. Really? What does that do for you? And that I know you and I have spoken about, Sarah, because I'm sorry, what? This is annoying you, that you have to sit and read that for a bit because they're not talking. How does that sit with you? I know, do you remember we spoke about an initial concept of your film, which was, why don't we do the whole thing without sound? Because how would that feel for an audience to be in the world that you're in all the time? And so there are these elements that, again, not by throwing it in people's faces and being horrible, but by educating them, saying, no, sit with that, please. That might make you feel uncomfortable, but it's important. In fact, my daughter gave me the sentence, I think it's called willful blindness, because it's like if you're a vegetarian, no, if you're not, you eat meat and you know how badly the chickens are treated, but there's a show about it or a documentary, you prefer not to watch it because I like eating meat. It's a willful blindness. And that puts us in an uncomfortable position. And just by somebody having to sit for 4 minutes and not hear you talk made them feel uncomfortable. It's like, come on now, people, get over it.
That made me think of a TV show that I love to watch. It's called Money Heist, and it's on Netflix. And some of my hearing friends said, I cannot watch that show because they're speaking in a different language. And I'm like, but the storyline is so beautiful. It's so good. You're missing out on that because you can't bear through seeing them lip read in a different language and you're hearing it in your language. It just amazes me how people can't actually sit back and get out of their comfort zone and learn about something else, learn about diversity in our world. I mean, we have beautiful people who are different from you. And if you're not willing to just give them some time to learn, you're going to miss out on the beautiful things that are in life that we live in.
Well, you know, there's that film that just won the Oscar for foreign film, and they're already remaking it with an American actor. Well, the backlash on that, and I hope they don't. I hope the backlash keeps on going of, I'm sorry, you want this, which is made beautifully. It's won an Academy Award with a phenomenal cast to be remade with an English American speaking actor so that you can understand it. We're lazy. As a community, we're lazy. And there becomes a point where we have to say, okay, am I helping you for an educational perspective, or am I helping you just because you can't be bothered? Okay. And we're always going to have people like that in the world. Well, they're missing out, as you said. They're not going to watch that show. But let's understand that those people maybe need educating. If they're half of those friends, you sit there and you say, let me show you, let me be here, let me support you whilst you watch this show that's in a foreign language. I watched one the other day as well, and I actually got really into it. It wasn't all in another language. I can't remember what it was called now. It was amazing. And it actually is about 10 years old, but I'd only just found it. In fact, I said to my friend, I've got this amazing show. And she was like, what? The one from 2009? Oh, yeah, that one. But they're speaking Spanish. And it's the Mexican cartel. And of course they should be. I don't need you to translate that for me. It doesn't sound the same. You know, I want to be part of that environment. I want to be taken into the entire world. So for this film to be remade because the community can't be bothered to read the subtitles is very frustrating. But you know what they're going to lose out? They lose out on the authenticity. They lose out on what that really means and feels. And I think that's where even our first 4 minutes of the documentary, I want you to sit there and understand the silence. I want you to experience that. I mean, I had, the lead actress in the film that you're in, Sarah, who is in a wheelchair. And I was very conscious. I spoke to her about where the wheelchair goes. From an aesthetically pleasing shot, the wheelchair doesn't fit. It's not my color palette. It shouldn't, I don't need it in the shot. But that's not right. From an opinion of that community, your wheelchair needs to be there. It needs to be next to you so that you could get on it if you need to. And it's funny, when my audience watched the movie, that I've been having people watching it and giving feedback, and I spoke about that, they said, what wheelchair? We didn't even notice it, because it was just part of who the scene was. And actually, it's not made into a situation of, and here's the wheelchair. If your character is just a character, it's part of it. So again, that community already was exposed to something that they hadn't seen before. And it doesn't do anything different. It doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. So we have to educate bit by bit. And maybe it is starting small and being understanding, or maybe it is about saying, come on now, just watch this and don't be so ridiculous. We have to learn when is the right time to infiltrate this way and when is the right time to infiltrate that way.
And I think it starts with this conversation that we're having now. It starts with dialogue like this. So again, we just want to thank you for your time and your patience with us and just having this open-hearted dialogue. Is there any lasting words of wisdom, Elizabeth Blake Thomas, words of wisdom you want to give to the world, like you've already given? Anything else you would like to add?
No pressure, no pressure.
No pressure.
It's so funny because I obviously say quite good things without thinking about it. So I'm not going to think. I believe that it's just about us all taking responsibility right now. We are in a new world. There is no two ways about it. And we have a choice now about how we go into that new world. Do we go back into our old habits? Do we look at those habits and just realign them slightly? Or are some of us going to do something totally new and different? Whichever way we choose, it's about accepting people the way they are and understanding their choices. So I'm not going to let somebody who decides not to watch that show with the subtitles affect me. I'm going to continue to make my way. But I'm equally going to remember maybe why didn't they want to watch it? What was it about them? Speak to them as much as the people that are making the changes, because those are the people that we're really going to need to work with and understand so that we can have as big an effect on this new world that we can.
That's beautifully said. You are such a beautiful person, and we need more people like you with those words of wisdoms and how you perceive the world in that way. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Really, really appreciate having you on this podcast. And for all the listeners, where can they find you on your social media platforms, your podcast? Go ahead and list them for us.
Okay, so I am mostly at Elizabeth_B_T. And I'm also at Medicine with Words, because the Medicine with Words is my methodology in life that I've brought into the way I run my sets, to the way I write my books, to the way I guide people, and even as a mother. And so that's my Instagrams. Facebook's I'm Elizabeth Blake Thomas. LinkedIn, I'm the same. My website, and at Mother and Daughter Ent, that is the Instagram. And then websites are motheranddaughterenT.com and medicinewithwords.com. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Is that
your podcast?
Oh, my podcast, thank you. Filmmaking Without Fear. And my book is out as well that accompanies it, Filmmaking Without Fear. So you can order that online. And my second book, which will be Living Without Fear, will be out at the end of the year. And my third book, Storytelling Without Fear, will be out next year. So I've kind of created, because the second podcast is also out too, but it's under the same umbrella, Filmmaking Without Fear. I know, I do forget. There's quite a lot.
I feel so lazy compared to you. My goodness.
Literally. I need to do something with my life now.
Well, we really appreciate you and thank you for your time. Thank you for being a part of our lives. Thank you for being an influence and an impact to so many people out there and sharing their stories and continuing being a storyteller. We really appreciate your time and efforts. And for our listeners, if you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at What's the Deaf to keep updated with everything.
And email us questions@whatthedeaf if you have any curious questions for us.
Until next week.
Until next week.
Bye, guys. Yeah.
We would like to thank dpan.tv and their services at aslcaptions.com for making the transcripts and captions of this podcast accessible for everyone.
If you're looking for captioning or transcript services, they do amazing work.